here. Welcome to a roast along on our 2 kilo digital electric coffee roaster. We use this roaster quite a bit in our space. We use it in class. We use it for profiling new coffees that we get for the web, for greens. We also use it for sample roasting. We can go down to about 300 grams as the most comfortable capacity, which is a very sweet spot for sampling coffees that we're looking to purchase. It also makes it a 2-in-1 where we can go all the way up to our full capacity of 2,000 grams in this machine, which makes it great for profiling and then transferring to larger roasters, but also doing a fair amount of production in a shop environment and maybe a wholesale account or two. We have a few customers out in the world that are roasting on electric roasters currently from us, and we thought it'd be a good time to go through and do a rundown about how we use this roaster in our space and kind of what transfers over one-to-one from personal experience on some calls with some folks that have these machines in their space already. I just plugged in my seasoning roast profile when I was getting them set up from what we did in our space here, and all the settings were practically one-for-one. With that in mind, we're going to be doing a profile with a coffee from South America. A nice regional blend coffee from Colombia. It's a great run-of-the-mill, it's a crowd pleaser coffee. It's gonna be chocolatey, it's gonna be sweet, there's nice acidity. But the idea is that you can take this profile, plug it in if you are on the electric 2 kilo, and get, at least 3-4 steps ahead of the curve, pun intended, and, really get yourself close to the finish line. So we're gonna be doing a full 2 kilo batch in this machine, and we're gonna walk through that all together. When we're preheating this machine, it preheats a little bit different than other machines, and the reason being is that with electric, what I've noticed is that you wanna keep all the heat that you can possible inside of the machine and not move it out with air. So when you're setting it up, you're gonna be using very low airflow with very high power on the electric. So for example, right now, our regulation of power on this machine is set to 5,000. If we were to set this down to 2,000 and then move our exhaust fan up higher, it would be very hard to get to our preheat temperature of 485 degrees. There's also no flame, so there's also no combustion exhaust, which means low airflow is perfectly safe. High power, very low airflow, perfect for preheating the electric. Preheat times are going to be around 25 to 30 minutes. If your space is a little bit cooler, it's a balmy 70-ish in here today, so warms up in a good 25. But if you come in one day and it's mid-60s because you had the AC on, maybe it's going to be 30 or 35. So you're going to let it get up and cycle at its high temp limit at least 2 or 3 times, and that alarm is gonna beep at you just saying like, hey, you've hit your preheat temperature, let it go on and off 2-3 times, and then you're sitting sweet and ready to go. So before we get started with this roast profile, we'll go over our charge settings or our preheat settings before starting here. And a lot of where things are currently set with 5,000 for power, our max power available on this machine. 6 hertz for fan speed, which if any of you have seen our lighter trick video, comes out to be about a low on that lighter, where you kind of see that flame getting pulled in a little bit at the trier port of the roaster at a soft 45-degree angle. That is our 6 hertz on this machine for reference. And our drum speed is set to 46 hertz, which when we do the count on the back of the machine by looking at the actual physical rotation of the drum, comes out to be, my notes here, 68 rotations per minute. So that gives us about 7, 14, 21, 28, 17 rotations in 15 seconds, which is a little bit faster than where we start folks off on our other machines. There's a lot more heat that you want to grab from the environment of the roaster itself, so we have a little bit more of a faster drum. So with all those settings, that is going to be our preheat and our charge settings before we dive into this roast. We're going to be using our data logging software, RoastPath. We'll go ahead and we'll record this and have a little picture so that you can kind of see what's going on. So now that we're set up with our data logging software, we're gonna go ahead and get ready to charge. What's really nice about the electric once you are fully preheated is that one cycle of temperature coming up, down, and then increasing in temp again is actually a nice sweet spot to charge at. You ever think of cooking on an electric range where when you turn the power on, you see those coils or that circle plate start to get glowing red? That's what you're gonna kind of see with the electric power in here. So as we're coming back up to temp and we're seeing the heat rise in the system. So if I'm looking at my data logging, I see all my temperatures starting to increase. My heating elements inside of the roaster are starting to glow cherry red. And when that starts happening, I know that, okay, think of it as like your power is turned on, or your gas is turned on. So that would give me the most heat going into the roaster, and that is when I want to start or charge my batch. So we just hit my high temp limit of 485, and we're going to be charging at 480 degrees. And so the way I look at that is as we're coming back down in temperature, my power is going to turn back on at 485 on the downtrend. And then by the time we hit 480 and we start coming back up again, my heating elements are starting to glow cherry red. And that's when we're going to charge. So now we're crossing down below 485 degrees. Our power is starting to turn back on. We cut forward a little bit because as your temperature rises over your set limit and then comes back down, it's going to take about a minute and a half for it to slowly come down because of that low airflow. So just know that's something to expect. And now as we're getting down to that 480, 481 ballpark, we're going to get ready to charge by putting our beans in the hopper here. All right. We're at 480, and I can start to see, waiting for the coils to start turning a little cherry red before we charge. 480.5, 480.4, so we haven't kind of like seen it level out quite yet on my temperature control. Now I'm starting to see a little red outline pop up on the heating elements here, and my temperature is wanting to start climbing a bit. We're gonna go ahead and charge because now I'm seeing the contrast of red to kind of like the shadow inside of underneath the drum. So we're gonna go ahead and charge, 480. All right. And so power is going to come back on the 5,000. You see it at the bottom of roast path here where it's represented as 5 kPa, but that's looking at the 5,000 for power. It's going to transfer that over. Our fan at 6 hertz, nice and low, and then drum speed at 46 hertz for that 68 rotations per minute. So even keel. Now, what you're going to see kind of like on the dry phase for electric is that it's going to be stretched out a little bit longer, but you're going to start to see a little bit more similarities in the back half of the roast where you start getting that mid phase or that kind of like flavor development, and then post first crack are going to be similar times that you're going to experience. We're not going to do anything with our power or our fan speed for a good amount of time in the roast, probably until 2 minutes before we anticipate green to yellow. So we're gonna keep our fan speed 6 hertz, really low, up until about 260 degrees bean temperature. This machine likes to get to green to yellow around 310 bean temperature. Again, remember this is kind of our machine, our space, our probes, so your number may be different. But once we get to 260, that kind of like 40-degree window, about maybe 2 minutes out from green to yellow, we're gonna start to see, some silver skin, some chaff kind of like start to come off inside the drum. So we're still going through the process of increasing our fan speed throughout the roast from start to finish, going from low to highest. to clean out anything that's inside of the drum. So air is still going to be doing that for us. It's also transferring heat, right? Air, convection, it's transferring heat for us, but also cleaning out the drum. These are the similarities that you're gonna see across machines. So we see we hit turning point, 2 minutes and 5 seconds at 227 degrees. And what I see when I'm looking at this, like I see kind of like a level plateau of like all the heat I have available in the machine is indicated by that blue IT line. I know that I have around 500 degrees in, say, the chassis of the roaster that is available to me that I'm utilizing right now. And I'm gonna kind of like slowly grab from there as we get closer to green to yellow. Power is gonna remain very high. I like to think of roasting with electric as if air is actually similar to gas adjustments, or if you've ever been on a gas roaster, or if you're coming from a gas roaster to electric, the same way you step down in your gas pressure on a gas roaster, you're gonna be stepping up in airflow in replacement of that. Kind of interesting. So every bump of air adds to the control of how you are steering on electric. Pretty cool. So 247, 249 on our bean temperature. Not seeing a lot of chaff or a lot of silver skin coming off right now. It's still looking pretty clean inside of the drum, so I'm not too worried about increasing fan just yet. Remember I said around 310 degrees is our green to yellow transition. So if I'm looking at 20 degrees per minute on my rate of rise, getting up to 260. So not quite 2 minutes out, but almost, so closer to 270 maybe. 262, still at 20 degrees, 21 degrees per minute, hitting our peak rate of rise, telling us what is the fastest pace are we moving in the roast. I'm gonna go ahead and do my first fan increase, which is gonna go to 12 hertz. They go up by halves, so I wanted to go up 6 hertz. I pushed the button 12 times. It's a nice useful trick of just being like, how far do you wanna go? Double it, and that's how many button pushes you gotta do on the control panel. So, seeing a little, some specks, some flakes, some chaff starting to pop up in the batch here, which that's good. We already increased our fan, so we're gonna be pulling out some of that chaff. And then we're gonna start to do more fan adjustments over time now, because we've kind of kept enough heat inside of the roaster to kind of get us through our dry phase, that alley-oop from turning point. And then as we're getting closer to green to yellow, which is gonna be, so at around 290, when we're about a minute out now, we're gonna go ahead and bump our fan up again. So we bumped fan up 2 minutes prior to green to yellow, now a minute prior to green to yellow. And it kind of mimics that first gas decrease at green to yellow that we tend to do, or a lot of roasters tend to do at that transition. So around 292, 294. Up that fan speed again, 18 hertz. Clean drum is a happy drum. Still no chaff coming out of the drum door in the front, so that's great. We have enough air moving stuff out. And our drum speed is fast enough, making sure that that chaff doesn't just build up in the pile of that bean mass inside of the roaster. So now we're coming up on 300 and we are looking for green to yellow now, 301. It's kind of starting to look that kind of like pale yellow, yellow-green. Not quite green to yellow yet. Still smells a little like sweet peas. A little bit more sweetness and like starchiness. Kind of smells like I walked into a Subway. Little more yellow in color. Another pull. Now it's like a little bit of toast or like Hostess white bread. So we're gonna go ahead and mark green to yellow. And I'm gonna do another fan increase. 1, 2, up to 24 hertz. So this has been my third increase in fan, and I'll pop up my adjustments here so you can see it in full. Nothing else has changed except for fan. Our power is still at max, and we're not gonna start decreasing power until probably the next like 30 seconds to a minute. So that'll be our first decrease in power on this machine. And so when you are decreasing, remember how I talked about that cooking on an electric stove and those red coils that heat up? Well, they cool off slowly. So you are kind of like planning ahead of time, like, oh, if I need to decrease energy and I want it to be decreased in a minute, then I should decrease a minute early. So we're getting 14 degrees per minute, 327 degrees or so. We're gonna kind of hold steady here. The goal that I'm aiming for right now is first crack around the 12 to 12 and a half minute marker. And I wanna get about 2 to 2.5 minutes in development where we can get enough time spent there where we can get to a higher temperature for a medium roast level. But enough time so that we get a well-developed inner and outer seed. All right, so our first decrease in power now. Kind of like keep things even keel. If we were to just leave our power at full, kind of max the whole time, remember, coffee is more and more delicate the hotter that you go. So it's only gonna take more and more heat over time if we just leave that power at the max. So we decrease that, and then following that power decrease, we're gonna do an air increase. So now we're kind of like volleying back and forth. We're gonna decrease power, and then we're gonna increase air, decrease power, increase air, as we're kind of steering into our parking spot towards the end of the roast. So as we start getting closer to 350, we're gonna go ahead and do another fan adjustment. And this will be our last 6 hertz adjustment before we do a really, really big air adjustment. So we've been moving 6 hertz this whole time, and this last fan speed adjustment that we're gonna be doing is up to 40 hertz. So we're gonna be jumping 10. And that's kind of like our final, like, okay, last kind of like power or air change to kind of like really tamp things down and get ourselves into control going into first crack and into development. Right. So now, remember I said we were gonna volley back and forth. We're getting to 360. Now I'm gonna go down in power to 3000. And the last time I roasted on this machine, we ended up doing about a lighter, like a light or a more developed light roast. And I had decreased gas down to power down to 2000. And I was just a little bit too much and kept us in more that lighter territory when we wanted to push it a little bit more medium. So this time I decided to do 3000 for power and hold on to that for longer instead of going down too low to pull all my energy out. So now before we get up to first crack, my final fan speed adjustment, up to 40 hertz. Now I can start to hear the fan, and in response to that big adjustment, we're gonna look at our blue IT temperature, our orange environmental temperature, and start to see how that fan is impacting the heat that's coming into the system. Is it just making it plummet and it's all going away, or is it still just like slowly sloping down and not just like ripping all the heat away from my batch here? First crack is around 387 on this machine, so we'll be hunting in the next 30, 45 seconds to listen for it. Definitely in that kind of just like toasted nut kind of smell right now. 383. I heard one outlier, one p happening. Pop, pop, pop. Waiting for that rolling crack. Pop, put a bit of pop. Now it's kind of like, it's really kind of like, not muffled, but it's starting to like roll. And it's more of like that, yeah, it's like popcorn covered up by the lid, like on the stove top. It's much more like poof, 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 instead of like pop, 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 pop. All right. So now we're in first, and we're kind of targeting between 400 to 410 as our medium roast level. And I said I wanted about 2.5 minutes spent in development to get to that end temperature. So at about 1.5 minutes, if we stay the rate that we're going, we might be at around 404. We still have energy, first crack. So I'm actually gonna decrease my power, and I'm gonna go down to 1500. Perfect. And this should take away enough power to keep me within my temperature range that I want to end at. And we're gonna start hunting for something that I want to eat, something that tastes good, smells good, and will taste good. Right now it smells like a Snickers bar. That caramel, chocolate, nougat, a little bit of that kind of like vanilla aspect. First crack has slowed down and is pretty much done. There's a few stragglers, but there's not like a consistent kind of popping going on. And right, we're kind of starting to get one of those, what is it, boxed brownie mixes that you make at home. That kind of like crust that forms on the top of a brownie cake. Like Ghirardelli chocolate brownies. And I think that's nice. It's a very, 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 very sweet, smells very dense. We're gonna go ahead and drop there. 406 degrees on the drop. 220 in development here. Nice. Cool. And that's our roast profile for a coffee from South America. Total roast time, 15 minutes and 3 seconds, 406 degrees with 2 minutes and 20 seconds spent in development. This will be a profile that can be helpful to any of you that are looking to just throw a template at a coffee from South America. So hopefully this gives y'all some pointers. Try it out, let us know how it goes. Otherwise, we'll see you next time, next roast along. Happy roasting.